The internet is dead and we are the ones killing it. And this really bothers me. Because the internet is truly a magnificent dream come true. Those who built the internet, the question of whether we can connect computers around the world, and therefore the people who use them, in such a way that they can communicate instantly. They were looking for answers. You will appreciate that this was a breakthrough that science fiction had been dreaming of for centuries. And thanks to science, it's finally become reality. But we killed him in 2016. I am serious. According to an interesting theory known as the dead internet theory, the internet as we know it died around 2006 or 2007. So what you're currently spending time on is actually just the leftovers of a dead system. And the weapon that the people who are the murderers of the internet use to kill this magnificent technology also has a name. Automation. Let's see how this idea, which initially started as a conspiracy theory, turned into reality year after year. Let me tell you this wonderful story, but I warn you. This video may wake you up from a long sleep by confirming some of your suspicions about the internet, and for some, that can be a disturbing experience. If you are ready, let's get started. If you look at the history of the internet and in the period known as 1.0, roughly between 1989 and 2004, very few people were able to create sites because they were so. You see, it is a place where few people have technical knowledge and equipment. This technological barrier to entry inevitably made the internet higher quality and more niche. However, with the bursting of the dot-com bubble in the year 2000, only sites that had realistic promises to survive that period were able to continue on their path, and the web began with 2 zeros. During this period, creating a site on the internet has become very easy with the rise of sites such as WordPress. Thus, consumers were able to easily become producers for the first time. However, at the beginning of this period, search engines such as Google and Yahoo were still in their infancy, so only the names of the highest quality sites were heard of, and therefore the internet was largely. It has remained a quality place. This process witnessed the transfer of many systems existing in the real world to the digital world. Banks, bookstores, toy stores, car dealerships, and all kinds of companies you can think of have started to create spaces for themselves on the internet. Now the internet. As connections started to get faster, people started to use the internet more actively, and a significant part of this active use. MIRC was creating chat rooms like ICQ and MSN Messenger. People here could chat freely and instantly with people they knew and didn't know from all over the world. Around this time, Richard Eriksson, a Swedish software developer, came up with an idea that could make the social side of the internet even more realistic. These conversational studies that I mentioned, by making very simple adjustments to your tools, you can make real friendships not only about chatting, but also about the whole. Realized that he could digitize his words. Everyone would have their own profile. So they can make friends with each other and share what's on their mind with their friends digitally. It would create a place where friends could expand their networks through their friends. Sound familiar? The site, initially known as Style Place and later renamed Lunarstorm. It went down in history as the first social media site. After that, a few more social platforms like Bold.com and 6degrees.com emerged and disappeared. But which started broadcasting in 2003. LinkedIn, Fortune, and MySpace would change everything. MySpace, in particular, would provide each user with the opportunity to create their own space on the internet, as its name suggests. Succeeded in permanently digitizing individuals for the first time. So it was no longer just companies that needed to have a presence on the internet, but also individuals. Inspired by MySpace, Facebook, or Facebook, was founded in 2004, initially for students, then for practical. It turned into a catalogue of people where everyone could be found, and by 2009 it had solidified its place as the largest social media platform in history. With Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram born during this period, billions of people started to exist on the internet, and the real purpose of the internet has finally been completed. Everyone was now literally instantly connected to everyone else on Earth. It was at this point that Kantar's mace began to run away. Because social platforms were working for free, that means you pay a fee to use them. You didn't have to give it. Naturally, they needed a model to make money. This model came from internet ads, which makes perfect sense, because social media platforms had such specific information about people. Advertisers no longer had to advertise on huge billboards and hope that they would reach their target audience, as they did in the past. They can be as specific as 26-year-old unemployed men living in Adana who like computer games and have visited the Steam site before. They started to be able to advertise to demographics. This is exactly what created the alignment problem on social media. Platforms that were able to outperform their competitors by simply maximizing user satisfaction suddenly had to satisfy advertisers as well. Thus, conflicting interests. A system in which they coexist was born. We saw this most clearly on Facebook. As the tree of evolution, we are looking at Facebook, which was once indispensable for everyone. Thanks for watching. Was shown to each of them. In this way, we were able to communicate science very effectively. But Facebook. He brought an event called Post. Initially, this feature was a tool you could use if you wanted your posts to be seen beyond your followers. You were giving some money, you were choosing a certain target audience. On Facebook, it would show your posts to people even if they were not your followers. But very few of those who have a Facebook page have used this feature. Because there was no need, your followers didn't share your posts anyway. Was more than enough to reach a wide audience. Disturbed by this, Facebook launched its first streaming algorithm based on artificial intelligence in 2013. Thus, which content is shown to whom is now determined not by the pages you follow, but by the decisions made by a central algorithm. The posts we made on the Evolutionary were now being shown to a much smaller percentage of our followers. We wanted to show it to the whole world. We were asked to pay money. After 2016, the weight of the algorithm increased tremendously, and the impressions. Our followers have fallen below 1%. I remember very well that if we wanted all of our followers to see a single post like before, we had to pay an absurd amount of money, like $300 per post. It is still like this today. Of course, Facebook was not the only platform that developed these algorithms. Subscribe to all social platforms. They realized that if they could show personalized content instead of own channels and pages, they could keep their users on the platform longer and thus show more ads. Moreover, thanks to the walls created with these algorithms, it was now possible to show them in many advertisements. This has tremendously strengthened the platform's relationship with advertisers. Just think about it. Today, more than 55% of advertising is digital. Google sells about 30% of these, and commodities sell about 25%. And on the other hand, the quality of the content producers on these platforms began to crash rapidly, because producing quality content was no longer important. It was about creating things that people would click on and spend time with. So lots of clickbait. So we started to see clickbait and nonsense posts. Ordinary citizens used to share parts of their lives on social media. They gradually stopped sharing on social media, because its walls were largely filled with paid content from professional companies. These platforms, which once felt like a small town, had now become a snow machine. And as it was famously said, what these platforms were selling was your presence and your attention. At this point, first YouTube and then other platforms started to introduce revenue-sharing models. In other words, a portion of the advertising revenues goes to the content that produces the content on which those ads are displayed. They decided to pay the producers, The aim was to attract more content creators to their platform. But this is not about improving quality, but about optimizing the algorithm. Created an audience of content creators, because whatever type of content the algorithms believe to show more, creating that type of content would generate more income. At this point, the algorithm might have been maximizing quality and value. Maybe the quality of the internet could improve again. But since the aim of the platforms is to keep you on their sites longer and show you more ads at that time, they do not interact with the algorithms. It prioritized whatever content increased the most. The things that usually create interaction are not flowers, insects, or butterflies. Fights, wars, intrigues, trickery, and all sorts of controversial and debatable issues. That's why the internet quickly began to turn into a toxic hell. Ordinary citizens have severely restricted sharing. What would happen if you did anyway? Shooting with giant production companies. Is it possible for you to compete with influencers who have become millionaires through cleverly designed social media ads? Of course, people still continue to share from their own corners today. But the proportion of these has decreased incredibly. Think about it this way, 70% of social media users today hardly share anything, because 33% fear that what they write will be used against them. 32%. He believes they will be lynched because of their views. There is even a rule on the internet known as the 99-1 rule. Social media users only. Only 1% produce content, 9% change and use that content, and 90% just consume it. Twitter seems like such an active and important place in terms of agenda, doesn't it? However, it is not the same as the societies. Only 10% use Twitter. 97% of the content there is produced by only 25% of the users. In other words, a small group determines what will be on the agenda. In such an environment, a very obvious way to make a profit emerges. Automation. In fact, automation is not inherently a bad thing. For example, with the content we write on our site. Or instead of manually sharing our new videos one by one on platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Discord, etc., we can quickly distribute them by taking advantage of automation. This is a good use of automation. But part of the same automation are bots, automated computer software that, once run, continues to perform the tasks assigned to it over and over again. They can also be set to work in a way that will write certain things under posts that contain certain words on social media. Likewise, by programming from a single center, they can change the agenda by sending hundreds of thousands of unwanted messages, which we call spam, in minutes to the channels where those few people can set the agenda. They can get undecided voters to vote in certain ways by automatically narrowing their vote or gently encouraging them in certain directions. This way they can change the outcome of elections. But perhaps most importantly, AI-powered bots can current topics. They can generate traffic to certain sites by producing automatic content and sharing it on social media. We also developed this to show the problems in this regard. I will share its details with you in the future. If you don't want to miss it, don't forget to open channel notifications now. But can you see the problem with all this? Now, the content itself can be produced with artificial intelligence. Its distribution can also be done by artificial intelligence. The comments on those posts can also be produced by artificial intelligence. I say artificial intelligence here, but these bots do not necessarily have to be artificially intelligent. This includes any bot that can create interaction. Take a look at this. These types of pages, which emerged on sites such as Facebook or Twitter, share hundreds of images generated by artificial intelligence. There may be no problem with this at first, but when you look inside, there are dozens of them. Sometimes you see that it gets hundreds or even thousands of likes and comments. Many of the comments contain words like Amen or very nice in English, which are completely meaningless. Those who like and share these. It is obvious that they are not open people. When you look at the profiles of people who liked, comment or share, you see that these are also completely automatically generated, fake bot accounts. According to a study conducted on Twitter in 2019, Turkey, which only makes up 3% of Twitter, created 20% of global trends. Of course, this is not something that users can do alone. As far as it could be determined, around 18,000 bot accounts managed to make hundreds of thousands of tweets about 19,000 different keywords and put them into global trends. And in this way, they tried to manipulate the local elections in 2019. Most of the famous users like Pepsi, Mercedes-Benz, and 50 Cent reached those numbers with fake followers on their accounts. In fact, it is thought that the fake account creation sector on Twitter is a $40 to $360 million sector every year. All of this gives rise to the idea of a dead internet theory. Originally put forward as a conspiracy theory, this theory suggests that most of the content on the internet is produced and consumed by bots, meaning that the share of people is now a minority. This part of the job is not complete, but the theory also suggests that governments are controlling people's minds by managing these bots. It can change election results, and that malicious actors can create mass change in this way. This part of the job is becoming less and less of a conspiracy with each passing day. New research articles are published every day that show that bot activity on the internet has affected many elections around the world, including the American elections. In fact, trench security studies aimed at early detection and destruction of these bot networks have gained momentum in the last 4 or 5 years. The scariest part of this theory is this: as algorithms working on the internet become more and more artificially intelligent. In other words, as those algorithms start to learn what should be shown from the content already interacted with on the internet, the behaviors that the algorithms see as real users may start to turn into behaviors belonging to bots, because most of the internet is now occupied by these bots. If this inversion occurs, the activities of real people on the internet will be limited. They may start to be categorized as fake, and it may become even more impossible for people to exist on the internet. Especially if large language models such as ChatGPT and Cloud become more widespread and cheaper, systems that do not need real people to share things on the internet and get likes for them. Pages and sites can be created. This could be the final nail in the internet's grave. Here it is. It's very hard to predict where this is going. Because if artificial intelligence reaches those absurd levels of success that we call omnipotent, we will no longer have a meaningful reason to produce anything. At that point, the production and dissemination of information may no longer be a human activity. Of course, everything is not over yet. We, humans, still have a voice and an existence. Therefore, using this and raising our voices against the botification of the internet is more important than anything else. If we can, instead of feeding empty discussions that are not based on bots, like the old internet, we can try to build platforms that prioritize value creation and spend more time on them. For example, we will bring together science lovers, especially on the Evrim AAC website. We are trying to build a value and knowledge-oriented social platform. If you open a free membership and share your posts there, we may be able to get this project off the ground. Both these types of niche projects, by listening to feedback from their users much more closely, they can also make more customized developments. We also pay attention to this. Therefore, your opinions are very valuable to us. I leave the links you need below. And although bots have taken over much of the internet, some studies examining the real-world consequences of this bot activity have found that they are not as effective as people think. For example, a study published in 2021, which evaluated the 2016 American elections and the 2017 German elections together. Bot activity can amplify candidates' messages and spread them farther, but the target audience is not undecided voters as those controlling the bots would like. It shows that there are voters who already support that candidate and are prone to being trapped in Yanko rooms. So I think the dead internet theory is just a conspiracy theory, or should not be seen as the absolute end of the internet. Rather, it should be taken as a harsh slap in the face. Most of what we see is fake, most of it carefully prepared and served to program us to think certain things are just lies. The internet still has amazing uses and will continue to take us forward. There is no doubt about that, but it is extremely important that we figure out how and in what way we can use it most effectively. Is it really important for you to be present and share on social media where you have an account? Or is it largely a waste of time? Is what you see there really real, or are they just lies that you have become addicted to in order to confirm what you already believe? The dead internet theory might be a good place to start to think about such questions. See you in the next video. Goodbye.